Good evening and welcome to Rock, Paper, and Grenades. I'm your host, Joshua Solomon. With me as always is the Honorable J.P. Marzullo. How you doing, J.P.?
I'm doing good, Wish the weather were a little cooler today.
Yeah? Are you bruised up from fighting commies last week?
Yeah, I got scratches and they draw knives on me now.
You dropped them back off in Massachusetts, right?
I did.
Okay,
yeah.
good.
I made them walk though.
Good, well.
Absolutely.
We're glad you're back.
Thank you.
All right. All right. This evening, we have Goffstown State Representative Lisa Mazer. How you doing, Lisa?
I'm pretty good. I hesitated, but I'm good.
So, Lisa, tell the viewers what you cover, because you're the Flotarial, which means you have more than one town, right?
Right. I also cover the town of Ware. So Goffstown and Ware, District 44, Hillsborough. And as you may know, in 2022, the Honorable Gary Hopper was in my seat, and he made the primary, and just soon after that had to withdraw, and they asked me to run in his place. So I knew I had big shoes to fill, and so I've just been trying my darndest for the past 2 years. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what we do here, obviously, trying to keep his legacy going.
Yes.
And they're right about big shoes, but also wisecracks are kind of hard.
Yes.
I don't have the same way that he does things.
I heard, and we did it with some of my seatmates in the House, the whole, the Jeopardy.
Oh, yeah.
How he would do that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you do that
so
all the time.
would do that. We still do that.
Oh, nice.
Those 30 seconds.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we do. I try and just honor him in little moments like that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah. So it's been a wild ride. But I was on also this past term the Health, Human Services, and Elderly Affairs Committee.
Oh, wow.
So the second busiest committee in the House.
Yep.
And we saw a lot of stuff come through. But I was really, it was good. I was put on some subcommittees for some big bills that actually the governor just signed.
Like what?
One of them was HB 619. So it came to our committee, and that is the bill that prohibits irreversible transition surgery on minors.
Nice.
But it came to our committee, it was kind of an omnibus bill. It had that, and then it had conversion, it had a whole bunch of stuff in it. And we knew as Republicans that this was never going to get through our committee the way it was. So myself and Representative Leon, Erica, and Leah Cushman from Ware asked to be on a subcommittee with 3 other Democrats where we would really do some work on it. And the first thing I remember saying was we have to chop it and laser focus it on just the irreversible surgery on minors. Yeah, and so we did. We spent a lot of work on that, and a miracle that we passed it in the House. But we had some Dem side with us because people say, well, that was just a Republican bill.
No.
But as you know, we didn't have the majority to necessarily pass stuff like that. I mean, on a given day, we were two-person majority, sometimes even in the minority.
Right.
But thankfully that day, some Democrats, one who I respect, Jonah Wheeler, young gentleman from Peterborough, got up to the well, and he knew what was at stake when he did that. And he just went up and he's like, I support this community, but the kids are the deal breaker for me. So we can't let this happen to kids.
It has to be that way, and we have harped on it over and over again. It's about the children, right? Once someone is an adult and is of age to make legal decisions for themselves and for their future, then I'm kind of hands off, whether I agree with it or not.
Right.
Then I'm hands off.
Right.
But anything that concerns a minor, and to be honest, we've had folks from all communities on this show, right? Including Representative Alexander, right? And I have never spoken to anyone who disagrees with that.
Right.
It's about the children. I don't understand how we got this far at the local and national level talking about children having these types of surgeries and irreversible chemical castration and all of this business.
Yeah.
I don't understand how we got that far when I speak to people on both sides of the issue, and no one is advocating for children.
Right.
So where's that radicalism come from? How did it get? How did we get here?
Yeah, and then to be called, because you were a part of that, you know, a transphobe and a homophobe and all that. It's like, no, that's not what I am.
Right.
I just want to see, like, let kids be kids.
Right.
And if that makes me an evil person, then you can say that all you want, but those aren't the facts.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah. So
who's the chair of that committee? I think we've had them on.
Wayne McDonald.
Yeah, we had
Representative
Wayne.
McDonald. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's tough.
Right, so the governor signed that. Is it effective immediately, or is there this waiting period to January 1st? Like, what's the details here?
Yeah,
you know, and what's going to be the repercussions next term if, God forbid, we lose the majority? Like, are they going to come back at it?
100%, yes.
Sure. Don't
100%. Yep. And they're going to go hard. So we also had a bill that I fought against on the floor that would have made New Hampshire a sanctuary state for transition surgery for minors.
Oh,
so minors from all these other states could have come to, and we only won that defeat by 2 votes.
Wow.
You know, so that was wham, I just, you know, hit the facts on the floor type thing, and thankfully it went our way. But yeah, all those are things, though, that they are going to attempt to bring back again. I guarantee it. You know, the no boys and girls sports.
Right.
Oh, they're gonna, come back on that one too.
Yeah, he just signed that one not too long ago.
He did the boys and girls sports. Unfortunately, he didn't go farther than that. Yeah, which is, honestly something I'm going to get behind next time.
Good.
There's also a bill that I'm excited about. I shouldn't say excited, but that's a weird word for this. But is for age verification for minors on pornography sites. That's good. And it sounds like, wait, that's not already happening? It's not. And I just learned of how dangerous that is lately, and how these children are accessing these sites and then being drawn into these communities where they're then trafficked, and horrible things are happening, and they are damaged.
So let me ask you a question about that. So I go on some cigar sites, and they ask your age. Are you 21?
Right.
Every beer site, every alcohol
this
site.
is way more than that.
How do they not?
It's way more than that, and that's why this is going to be such a huge bill, because there's so many technological aspects to it. But it can be done. So we learned about it from a representative in Kentucky. She was the first one to pass it.
Oh,
so
nice.
she actually will be working with us.
Oh, that's great.
So we've been networking throughout the entire United States. We've been busy little bees, some of us. So myself and 2 other representatives, women, are going to be working on that. We're already kind of pulling some things together, and we'll get some people in to testify for that when it's ready. But here's the thing, though, that could be a dangerous one, because apparently, porn is big money. And when you start poking at that bear, they don't want you, that's a big thing. Yeah. And so, that bill was passed in Kentucky. And then, Pornhub then had to, they moved right out of the state. So to date, like 11 states have been Pornhub has been affected by this particular bill. So it's hopefully one. It's all down south, so maybe we're going to try and bring something to New England.
So I don't know. I think JP was saying, we go onto these sites like the alcohol sites. Like you go to Anheuser-Busch or something like that. It asks you to put your date of birth in.
Right.
But you can lie.
Oh, for sure, and that's why this is way more than that.
So what other, aside from putting in your credit card to say, hey, here's my credit card, and I'm over 21 and I can go to Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah, I honestly don't know
how is that going to work for?
Yes, I don't have all those answers. Because the other side of that would be, and don't get me wrong, I'm not disagreeing with you in any way whatsoever. The other side would be that those organizations would have to put up IP blockers and stop allowing
anybody within the state to
And that's why they were so unhappy with this bill. So it did create a lot of loops for them to have to go through. So
that's a big thing.
Yeah.
And if take the porn out of it, take just any business. If I was told that I'm not allowed to have my website be available in these 3 states, but my website and everything that hosts it is in a data center in another state that's not affected by this, right? I'm not doing anything wrong from my state.
Right.
So if you don't want to see my website, you have to turn it off.
Yep.
Your infrastructure inside of your state has to turn that off. And so that's where I'm getting at is if this goes through, then now New Hampshire has to come up with the IT people, the technology people, to go and have that blocked.
Is it New Hampshire or is it Pornhub that actually has to do it? That's going to be.
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
If I were them, I'd be saying my servers aren't anywhere near New Hampshire, so that's not my problem. That's not my problem.
Yep.
Right? And it's New Hampshire's problem.
Yeah.
And when it's New Hampshire's problem, now every internet provider in New Hampshire, from SpaceX's satellites to Fidium to Comcast to I don't know who else. There's probably a dozen.
Yep.
They all have to then spend administrative time blocking all of those sites.
Well, okay,
that's where I'm getting at.
Okay, I hear you.
Is that we're going to put a burden on somebody that's not your target? Right?
I don't have the answers to a lot of this. We literally just started digging into it last week.
I'm playing devil's advocate here, because there's a cost to this.
Absolutely.
And obviously you want the cost to be pushed off onto the pornography sites.
Not the taxpayers.
But there are literally thousands or tens of thousands.
Yep, I hear you.
And so how do you police that?
Yep.
Because you're going to have to set up an organization in New Hampshire to police what's coming in.
I don't think that's the case because Kentucky didn't do that. So more details to come later, once we kind of dig into it all. But another bill that I was really proud to have been a part of was the Safe Haven for Babies bill that the governor just passed. So that now makes it a law in New Hampshire, again, first in New England. Pretty fantastic. That makes it so that women who are unable to take care for their children, instead of dropping them in dumpsters or in the woods, there's these boxes that they can anonymously
like the Eckersley case.
Yes, yep.
It's perfect.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and then that was a tough one though. So what was so amazing about that bill is that it came through my committee, and we actually had one Republican that couldn't get on board with it because he did not like the part where the anonymous and no repercussions for the possible abuse of leaving that baby. Thought that was kind of a deal breaker. Came around later, but couldn't get in on it. So it went to the House floor, interim study, which we know, dead on arrival.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
So that morning, myself and, Representative Katie Peternal, she came up to me, and she's like, this is the day, how do you feel about fighting for this one today? And so, we had nothing planned. So she's sitting in her seat writing the speech. I'm writing the parliamentary inquiry, the PI.
Yep.
And so we get up there, and the first thing the Dems tried to do was table it.
Of course.
That failed. And so all of a sudden we're like, oh, okay. So then a Dem who's on my committee went up to the well and just kind of started spewing some lies about everything. So you can actually see me, if you can watch the video. I'm up at the front of the House, kind of almost on the ground writing, trying to rebut everything that she's saying as she's saying it right there. So that was a fun little, I've never been a part of a real kind of debate like that where you're and you're doing it right on the,
But see, that comes comes from your heart, though.
Yeah.
You don't have to plan it ahead of time.
Yeah.
And those are the most effective debates.
Yes.
Because once people understand that,
right,
they're more apt to side with you.
Yeah, so we did. We ended up, and so miracle of miracles, we ended up passing it.
Nice.
It was tight, and then the governor signed it, and so now it's a thing. So that was one that was pretty neat. I've never been a part of a process like that. I did a lot of floor speeches this term, and a lot of people warned me not to do that. They said, it's your first term, observe, learn, take it all in. But for a lot of freshmen, that was not the case. Because a bunch of freshmen were on the education committees, and HHSEA, and they needed all
criminal justice committees.
Yeah, and so they needed all hands on deck. So if you were called to do something, you did it.
Yeah.
And so I did, and it wasn't easy, but I learned a lot, and it just makes you a better leader, a better person. I learned a lot, and from a lot of great people. We have a lot of great representatives in the House.
Yeah, we really do.
Just a fantastic group of people. And when you're in the trenches together like that, you really, you bond together, and you know that not everybody, but most, you can feel it, when you're up there just fighting for something that you believe in, you can feel the energy from that. And then after, it's cool too to get some high fives from Democrats that will come and slide into the seat next to you, and they're like, yep, just so you know, that convinced me, and I voted with you, and I wanted you to know. So that, when all these people, there's this huge divide, even in our town in Goffstown right now, and a lot of people say I'm the cause of that divide, but I'm just trying to stand up for what I think is right.
Exactly.
And because of that, I'm being called this and this and this. But if they saw some of the activity in the House and how I am trying to work with the other side, you can't get things done if you're just battling, with you all the time. So I do wish that the tone could come down a little bit, the attacks, the name calling, the vitriol. Yeah. I mean, we're seeing it on a national level, and we saw the result of that. It was, I think, a month yesterday that happened, and we need to. It's funny. The days after, it's like, oh, we need to do better. We need to do better, and then boom, it's like forgotten.
Starts all over.
And then it's this vicious cycle of waking up every day to what's the new crazy going to be today? Yeah. And but I think the goal of some of that is to get you to quit and to stop doing what you're doing. And what people don't realize is that for some people, myself included, is that gives you a greater resolve to keep doing it, and makes you, just even more determined than ever. So, I know some people do actually give up. And there's days, my husband knows that there are days, even today, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, $100 a year. What am I doing?
I know, you always have to question yourself with that.
And you're out, there's so much money that you pour into these campaigns, and you're door knocking and spending so much time. And you just have to, at the end of the day, why am I doing this? And when you keep reminding yourself of why you are, sometimes I tell people that when I sit in the House and the Dems, they throw these crazy bills at us, right? I mean, if people only really knew, we have like 1,000 bills. If they knew what we were on the cusp of on a weekly basis in the House, that New Hampshire is on the cusp of communism every Thursday when we're in the House.
Sure.
And so when you sit there are days when I'm like, you feel like a shield of these darts of crazy coming at you, and it's like, shields up. Of no, you are not going to do this to New Hampshire. You are not going to turn New Hampshire into this. This is not how it's going to go today. And so, those are the days, and that's what I've kind of, and I didn't start like that. I started like an ostrich that wanted to hide my head in the sand every time someone looked like cross-eyed at me or something. I did not start brave. And so...
well, I'm glad you turned brave.
Well, I mean, it's still a process, but one of my constituents saw kind of what was going on, and he sent me, and it changed everything for me. He sent me a quote from Andrew Breitbart. I won't quote the whole thing, but the gist of it was, you know, walk towards the fire.
Right.
And so many times when all these things that are even now that are happening today, and they just, you know, your tendency is to just run and hide and disappear from it, and so many people do.
Yeah.
You know, but you have to purposely in your head, no, I'm going to walk towards it, I'm going to walk through it, and I'm going to be better on the other side of it, even though I don't know it right now.
So what would you like the viewers to know about this election coming up? Some of the things that
yeah, okay.
We sort of know some of the things you've done, but you know, what would you like to see done now?
Election coming up, like in Goffstown, or
no,
what do you mean?
In a primary.
Okay.
For your seat.
Okay.
I know we're a little away from that, but.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So I'm actually running with a new mate, Ross Berry.
Oh yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So.
Did we have him?
Yes, we've had Ross
Yeah.
Berry.
Okay. So. Yeah, Leah Cushman is no longer in there, and so there was some moving around, and so Ross Berry is now running with me. He's I'll call it my ballot mate. And he's great. He has the experience in the House, and so we're going to be out door knocking and stuff
together. And he
together,
never stands strong with anything, and
right.
He's always kind of mushy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
You've got a good mate.
Yeah, he knows his election law stuff, that's for sure. Yeah. So it is. It's just... they're actually, having gone through a recent thing with the right to know law.
Yep.
I'm actually, Joe Alexander and I are going to be working on the right to know law.
Oh wow.
Because there's too many things that are cloudy in it that shouldn't be cloudy.
Right.
Such as, you know, what just happened in our town is I ran for library trustee this past in March, and the Dems thought it would be a great idea to ask the library if all the 6 candidates running, Joe Alexander and myself were 2 of them, if we had library cards. And so not only was that answer given to that person, but the library cards were given.
Yeah, the numbers and everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
And so how is that okay? And it's right there, but they tried to like twist the right to know law, and I'm like, that shouldn't be twistable. So
exactly.
You know, trying to work on that a little bit more.
What memberships I'm a party to is not part of right to know. That's a
right. There's exceptions.
You're a member of the library, but it's still a private membership as far as you're concerned. They've got no right to that because that's not part of your official duties as a state representative.
I know, but our town lawyer thought it was. So he gave the library the okay to do that. So that's just...
Who hired that lawyer?
So we're still... that's a whole thing, and we're still
coming after you.
That's going to be a process, but that's something that after going through it, that you realize, there's some holes in here that, and then, you know, the other bill that I mentioned, and then, I mean, I'm determined to keep boys out of girls' sports, and out of, not only that, not just grades 5 through 12, like what that was just passed, college, everything. Yep. No men in women's sports, no men in women's changing rooms, in prisons.
What you need to do
yeah.
is when you're presenting your case on the floor, just play a video of the gold medal Olympic boxing round.
Oh yeah.
I know. Yeah.
Yep.
Right?
I know.
Because we have legalized the beating of women.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, and Riley Gaines was just here. She's very famous for what she stood up for, and I love that. I call her my shiro because she just doesn't care, and
nope.
And they've tried to do so much to her, and she's still standing her ground, and I just think that's so admirable, and she's setting such an example. You know, I'm not a woman's lib or anything like that, but I do consider myself a conservative feminist. And I have seen, women have come a long way. Even you see the representation in the House and things like that. And in high school and beyond, I played sports a lot in college, and I know what they did to help me become the person I am today, and I would hate for a young girl to miss out on that.
Yeah.
And for all that we've done for little girls and women, and now they're just turning it all upside down.
I don't understand why anybody doesn't see the logical outcome. If we go down this path, then all women will be pushed out of all positions.
Right.
Because biological men will say that they're women. And where will we be when men are controlling everything again?
Yep.
Why aren't the liberal feminists coming out against this?
I don't understand it.
This is what they spent the last 50 years fighting for.
I know. I do not understand it. It is just...
Yeah, I mean, taking scholarships away from high school girls who have worked their whole life for that. And that's the only way they can go to college, maybe. Maybe they don't have the money, but they have the skill.
And opportunities and medals and and just even, I know women or little girls in New Hampshire, their parents reached out to us as representatives saying, my daughter is on a team, with a male, and I had to pull her out of the sport. That's not fair.
No.
That should not be happening. And then again, though, they twist it on you and say, you're this, this, and this because you think this. And it's, no, I am just standing up for little girls.
Absolutely.
And I'm just standing up for women.
And I don't understand the parents of the girls. It's the parents of the girls that I don't understand.
Yeah.
Why isn't the parent of every other girl on that team going bananas over this?
Right.
Why aren't they fighting this? Because you've spent your entire career as a parent raising your child, encouraging her to be the best that she can be, and some mediocre guy who couldn't hack it in the men's sport comes over and just trounces her.
Right.
Why aren't the other females' parents just all over this, all the way through the collegiate level?
I know.
Why aren't they?
I don't. I hope they more do now that they see more people are starting to stand up to it. I mean, you probably saw, in the Olympics, whenever like a biological woman did the XX now of like that's a sign that we're going to fight for, that we belong in these sports and we're not going to have these taken away from us. So I would like to quickly throw in, there is a primary in Goffstown. There are 4 candidates running for 4 spots, and there are 4 true conservatives running in Goffstown. And that's Joe Alexander, who we've mentioned here. He's an incumbent running. Sheila Seidel is also an incumbent. She's running. Sherry Reinfurt and Henry Gaiuson III. So there are 4, that's just for the Goffstown seat, and then Ross and I are for the Goffstown Ware seat. Nice. We do not have a primary. There's 2 running for 2 spots. But there are 5 people running in that other spot, and we need to get the true conservatives in. So I'm going to put that plug up there.
There you go.
I mentioned their names.
Now, how can they reach you if somebody wants to reach you?
Well, I mean, my phone number is public. My email is public. It's all on, the
state.
Yeah, the state site.
Good.
I have a Facebook page that I'm very active on. Now, here's the thing with the Facebook page, though. I used to have all comments open. Right? It became a battleground of crazy.
Yeah.
So now I do post pretty regularly, almost every day, but I have just shut down all comments to everyone. People can like it or whatever, but I've had people call me, they can email me, whatever. There's many other ways. We don't have to do a Facebook battle. And if you really want to get a hold of me, you can. And I will always respond. So, yes, that's a good way to go.
Thanks for being on. I wish you got a little more time. Maybe
yes, I know. I'm sorry.
We can have you on again.
Campaign season.
Here we go.
Yep, so we're going to be door knocking like crazy, and it's going to be, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for this election.
Well, good luck to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Yep.
Good to see you.
Good seeing you.
Don't forget to take that off, because we've had people run off and tear it.
Including me.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa. So JP, you know, we heard some horror stories from Lisa about the nasty politics at the local level.
Yeah.
And this nastiness is something that we've seen nationally, we've seen statewide, and now we're seeing it at the local level. We got neighbors that are really going after each other.
Yeah.
And they're getting each other arrested for doing very innocuous things, you know, pretending that they're threatened by certain language.
Yeah.
And it's all coming from the other side. It's been that way for decades. It's nasty. So what do you think? Do we need to go on the offensive? She's talking about walking towards the fire, and she's doing a great job of it. But at some point, do we need to go on the offensive and start being dirty like they are?
Well, I think we have to respond some way. Doesn't necessarily have to be as dirty as they are, but it has to be, the message has to be right, and we have to go after them. And I think you're seeing that now. You're going to see that.
Yeah. Thankfully, over the last 6 months or a year, we're starting to see a turn all across the nation about getting this word out and people starting to realize where the nastiness really is coming from. But I don't think we're there yet. I mean,
no, we're not.
We're not. I feel like we need to be on the offensive a little bit more. So, all right, folks. So
first time ever.
First half of the show, we had Lisa, and our second half of the show, we have another returning guest, Mr. Max Abramson. How you doing, Max?
Lousy.
Lousy.
I haven't seen you in such a long time. I haven't been on the show in a couple of years, I think. Giving
we've got a new studio and
everything. And whatnot. And it's so much nicer and bigger.
There's motorcycles in the background. You can hear the motorcycles. Perfect.
There we go. It's more the New Hampshire look and feel.
Exactly.
Without motorcycles, it's one of the things that I noticed first thing I came here is lots and lots of people, not just biker gangs and so forth, but veterans and just people love to go out
and host of shows.
I heard the statistic, it must be 20 years ago now, it's probably the same. I mean, at least anecdotally it is, that New Hampshire per capita has more motorcycle riders than the rest of the nation.
Oh, really?
As far as the population density goes.
I knew that something like...
That's what I understood.
I've heard 15 or 16 or 17% maybe of Granite Staters are armed service veterans. But I don't know, I don't know if that counts, everything, Coast Guard, Merchant Mariners, National Guardsmen and whatnot. I bet if you included everyone who goes into war zones, civilian contractors, I was a Merchant Mariner for 12 years. I don't know if they count that as toward the total. It could be like 20%.
So why don't you, you're running for CD1.
I'm running for CD1 against Pelosi Pappas, who, as I've said many times before, based strictly on voting record, votes the way he's told by Pelosi and party leaders 99.5% of the time. People sometimes get upset. They like his kind of demeanor or something like that. And I hear that sometimes, that they like a politician, but we're voting on voting record. I believe that our responsibility as Americans is, in a constitutional republic, we vote to limit the terms, powers, and budgets of Congress and government, and put a check on power. And all 4 Democrats in our congressional delegation. That is pronounced.
I don't know what happened today.
All 4 of them voted for FISA, and all 4 of them voted to allow the government to spy on your home network, your Wi-Fi network, your business Wi-Fi network without obtaining a warrant. All 4 of them. Most of the Republicans in Congress voted against that. Unfortunately, we also had, 30 or 40 House Republicans vote along with it. Same thing with the war on terror, war on crime, war on drugs, gun control. You always have a handful of, unfortunately, Republicans in Congress, which is another reason why we need term limits for Congress. But it's also a reason why we need to get people involved voting September 10th on the state primary, vote out the rhinos, and also November 5th, voting out the Democrats. It's not enough to vote out the Democrats because, as we saw under Sean's state income tax Jasper, even though we had a kind of 60-40 majority in the House, the Democrats still ended up prevailing on 3/4 of the bills because they also controlled the Speaker and the committee chairs.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, what have you been doing, since then? Since I know you've been out of the House this past year or the past
I announced an exploratory committee in October.
Okay.
I officially announced and had an event in December of last year, and making the case for term limits. I really believe that we're going to go bankrupt. I believe that we'll end up, like it'll be like Greece or Venezuela or something, based on current spending projections, if we don't get term limits passed for Congress. And the reason is, we've seen consistently on the voting records that, again, not just the Democrats, but some of these Republicans in the Senate who've been in there for 30, 40, 50 years, I know it's a small number, but there's a study out, I believe, by Florida State University. No, it's a National Taxpayers Union. And they found that members of Congress, the longer that they've been in, the more money they spend. And then there's another one by Florida State University that shows at the legislative level that the 15 states that have term limits, the newer people coming in are a little bit more careful about the limitations on the budgets and powers of bureaucratic agencies and how much control they have over your personal life, your business, your home, your finances, healthcare, and so on.
Yeah.
They put a little bit narrower kind of blinders on them to limit the size, scope, and power of these agencies. So it's almost 80% of political power at the federal level. You have federal, state, county, and local.
Right.
Almost 80% of powers at the federal level is at the in Congress, House and Senate. And I decided to just really quickly look at the empirical data, and we found that when you have Republican congressional majorities, the economy grows at a decent average rate of 4.1%, and we businesses are able to add anywhere from 1 to 6 million jobs per year, depending on if it's a recovery. You're not going to get 6 million jobs a year every single year because we run out of unemployed workers, of course, which would be a good thing. But actually, Japan had that problem in the late 70s and 80s, a labor deficit, which it's a good problem because it forces businesses to pay more, offer better benefits and working conditions. But when you have Democrats in Congress, we lose an average of 2 to 3 million jobs a year. Because of their tax and spend, regulate, stopping energy exploration, stopping fracking, stopping pipelines, which kills jobs in transportation and manufacturing, and then you start adding up all the unfunded mandates and so forth. So I decided average growth rate is less than zero. It's like minus 0.5% or minus 1%. So every time we have Democrats in Congress, it's a disaster, economic disaster at least. So I decided to go to look at compare legislatures, the charts where they show a red state versus blue state. Right. So obviously the 9 out of 10 of the 10 highest job growth states have Republican legislatures. 9 out of 10 of the worst have Democrat legislatures. You always get an errant, occasional outlier.
Sure. They
have a mixed legislature, governor, what have you. But consistently, state and local tax rates and unemployment rates are about 40% lower in states with Republican legislatures, and same thing with the crime rates. Crime rates go down when you switch from Democrat to Republican. You get your self-defense rights back. We stop the revolving door prison system. We stop sanctuary cities. We stop a lot of different policies that actually make crime worse, that make problems worse. And John Arlott Jr. in his book found that crime goes down by about 2 or 3%. Initially, in the first year, new policies come in, and then crime rate continues to go down by about 0.5% to 1% per year, year after year in states with Republican legislatures. Broke it down again by county, and I told this to the legislature, if you split, half of America lives in Republican counties, half of America lives in Democrat counties, and you find that if Republican America, the Republican half of the country, Republican counties, that's where your criminal justice, DA, prosecutor, sheriff's department, judges, criminal justice system is, we would have the 4th lowest homicide rate in the world in Republican America if we actually did a split by county. If you look at the half of America that lives in Democrat areas, and this includes rural, mixed, all white, majority Latino, majority black, what have you, they would have the 3rd highest homicide rate in the world, right behind, I believe, Ecuador and Honduras, or El Salvador and Honduras, Ecuador. And 85% of all homicides happen in Democrat-run jurisdictions. All 15 of the 15 highest homicide rate counties are run by Democrats. And every high crime ghetto in America is run by Democrats. And so the Democrats have responded, well, they had to move in and deal with all these problems, but we went back and looked meticulously and found that every single time, none of them were high crime ghettos before the Democrats took them over. So then we look at the past crime statistics, and if Democrats get in at the county level or the city level, over time, crime problems, unemployment, income inequality, everything that we can measure objectively. So I will say this about my impression of the Republican Party is they tend to be good about things that are objectively measurable. When you have policies that are harder to measure objectively, the kind of economists and policy wonks and business people and whatnot, not able to necessarily craft policy as well, and so there's no way of proving this one way or the other, but I think when it's objective, when we have clear data that we can look at, clearly Republicans do better there. When we don't have data, when it's more of kind of a look and feel, random quality of life issue, things that we can't look at, then we have no idea if Republicans are doing better or not.
So all of those stats, we actually have those numbers, we have those stats, but anecdotally, conservatives have known that for decades. And how do we get that message out? Because
that's kind of what you just touched on earlier.
You've got folks that are living in these ghettos in Chicago, and they're having 80 shootings every weekend, right? The Friday through Sunday statistics come out every Monday.
Baltimore's like that.
Right, Baltimore. How do you get a population that does not realize that after 40 years? So how is it that they keep thinking that the policies that they're being given by their Democrat overlords, how is it that they are not seeing this light? I don't understand.
Part of the reason is the insistence on sticking with a two-party system. So people have talked about urban voters splitting up, and they'll just let the Democrats be, the crony capitalist, socialist, whatever you want to call it, party, and then they would have another urban party that's just more oriented towards reform. The Reform Party talked about that. They never did it, and the only places that the Reform Party could get elected is mostly rural, really small town areas where you have, in New Hampshire we have more elected positions than we have people to run. So ordinary folks in New Hampshire can go file for office. Yep. But how do you reach people? I grew up in public housing. And so I saw a lot of this, and the Democrat activists would come through, and the first political message I ever heard was some Democrat activist came through and they said, if Ronald Reagan gets reelected, you're going to be thrown out in the street. And I was like a little kid, 6 or 7 years old, and I thought, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
See, that's the common sense, right? Like, and that's what I tell people. Yeah. If you hear something outrageous from the media, if somebody is trying to tell you something and it is outrageous like that, why do you believe it? Why don't you stop and think, wait a minute, that's a little over the top? And you're saying that as a child, you recognized it immediately.
Right. And so when we talk to people who are around back in the old hippie days, the Democrats were doing that, back in the 1960s. Lily Tang Williams, I don't know if you have her on your show. She came here from communist China, escaped, came here to freedom, and sure enough, the Democrats were talking and saying all the same things that the communists were doing. And so I had a slide that I was going to try to send in. People who've watched the show before have seen this slide, but it shows here are all the policies of the Soviet Union, here are the policies of the Democrats, and then here's everyone else. And the Democrats and the communists have all the same policies, and it's not like 3 or 4. It's like it's a whole long list of 20 some odd different policies and attitudes, but it's the tactics that the communists have always used to divide people by age, race, class, gender, background. And once you start saying, it seems like the policies, like when we talk to Democratic voters, about half of them, when you give the actual specific, Republican policy or a policy that President Trump enacted, like right to try, or term limits, 4 out of 5 Democratic voters support term limits. But I just had a couple come up to me at, I think maybe it was Hudson Old Home Days, and they said that actually they were Democrats, and what they were told was that Democrats were the party of the poor, were the common everyday people, and that the Republicans were a party of rich, white, and indifferent. And I'm like, you You got to be, you still believe, this is like 2024. We have the internet, we have everything. You still believe that? You've got rich Democrats like Bloomberg, Soros, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates.
Yep.
Tom Steyer? What's the guy who bombed the Capitol in 1979?
Oh. Bill
Ayers. The Weather Underground, all the communists there.
Weather Underground.
And then again, when you look at Antifa, BLM, Women's March, all of the organizers, most of the union officials,
all funded by filthy rich billionaire
they're
liberals.
all Marxists, and these Marxist college professors. I was in college recently. I graduated in must have been 2016. Starting to get a little. Wait till you turn 40 and it gets a little hazy. So I graduated. I went back to college to get a different degree in computer science. And while I'm there, sure enough, there's Sherry Frost there.
Sherry Frost.
She's a complete, nutter. She is. So I was a state legislator representing the southern seacoast, Hampton Falls, and Seabrook. And Sherry Frost said something like, so there's a kid with he had a red Trump hat, and he does the AOK sign all the time when he's talking. That's how he gestures. And so she went on and she publicly said that he's probably a white supremacist. He's 9 years old. I just saw this kid a couple weeks ago putting out signs, and his father let me put his sign out front. So they didn't remove her. So anyway, when she was called to the carpet on this, called an account, instead of apologizing for just hideous remarks, instead of apologizing like she's supposed to, she doubled down and she said, "Well, probably the whole family's white supremacist."
Yep.
So this is literally the Democrats' attitudes toward small town America, toward the South, toward Rocky Mountain areas. They call us flyover country. Up northern New England, they call us flyover country, and it's unbelievable that they have this attitude. And you have all of these, super duper kind of synthetic left wing clusters, where they have all of these, little isolated blue enclaves or something like that. And people just keep repeating the same things over and over and over again. Well, there was this guy in Bagadix, Alabama in 1979 who said the N-word. Well, so what? People say the N-word all the time. That doesn't mean trying to paint 80 million people who are trying to save the country as all sexist, intolerant, xenophobic, homophobic, Islamophobic, racist, bigoted, just because there are a few people out there who are like that. And by the way, the worst of them, when we talk to black folks, is guilty white liberals. In fact, Malcolm X warned about the so-called white liberal.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And he said that, Martin Luther King Jr. also was in jail right before he was assassinated. And he was thinking about what Malcolm X had said, and he was thinking about that, and he realized that too. And shortly thereafter, he was assassinated also. So as soon as as soon as you have a black leader start talking the truth about how things really are, they end up in prison. They end up being silenced, and now they have such control over the media, concentration of media ownership, they can block the messaging. So,
or write their own. That's what they're doing now.
Twitter's a free speech platform. You can reach people now through that, and it's much more open. Facebook is getting more and more restrictive and censorship.
Yes, it is.
So they had a judge in England who literally just sentenced a woman to 20 months in prison for a Facebook post criticizing government policy.
Oh,
so that's been going for a long time. Virtually everyone in Western countries who speaks out about the international communists, like the Progressive Alliance, anyone who speaks out against them, eventually ends up being audited by the IRS, gets screwed over by the city, you get blacklisted, you can't get certain public jobs or public programs, or you get prosecuted. And someone said, here's a list of all these Republicans who got prosecuted, and so many who got sent to jail. And my response is, every one of those people has spoken out about government corruption, and then all of a sudden, under Democrat presidents, Obama, Biden,
Well, that's the soundbite they want. That's the soundbite they're desperately trying to use against Trump. Oh, he's a convicted felon, right?
Well, why do you? But who?
No. That's exactly why they did that, so that they could get that soundbite, and so that they could use that against them, hoping that the country is dumb enough to believe it.
And Trump's numbers actually went up by like 2% when that happened. His numbers actually, it was the only thing that budged his numbers at the time. It was people were like, wait a minute, so what's the charge? Because I think it's Missouri is the show me state, and they're like, show me the evidence, show me the charge. Don't give me all this. Just show me the evidence, What are you accusing him? And you know what they accuse him of? That he's using his own money to pay someone to be quiet, which is almost the same thing. It's actually not as bad as when the Clinton campaign used federal campaign money. Now, this is a federal funding.
$800,000 is what they used.
I'm talking about the $50,000 that the Clintons paid to the father. Bill Clinton had been having an affair with a 16-year-old black girl. She got pregnant, and when she was 17, told the father, and long story short, paid the father $50,000 to force the girl against her will to go in for an abortion and kill the baby. And ironically, it's Democrats and rhinos are funneling $600 million a year of your tax money through Planned Parenthood's regional affiliates and right back into the campaigns of Democrats and rhinos.
So how are you, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that $800,000, Clinton paid Paula Jones $800,000. That was public at the time that she was given $800,000, and here we are taking Trump to court over what was it, 120?
Yeah.
And there's some discussion about whether he even knew about it, or it was. So
but
anyway.
We have Democrats in the legislature say all the time, they claim that no one has ever been forced to have an abortion. They say that over and over and over again. And I always say, do you have psychic powers? Because we have women come in every single session, every single year, in fact, saying that they were forced to or cajoled or felt pressured.
We've had trafficked women on this show who have been forced to have abortions. So
I have a public access show in Merrimack, and we're able to reach not a lot of people, not as many as rock, paper, hand grenades, but we're able to reach a lot of people about this. I did want to mention term limits.
Yep.
So I am campaigning to get term limits passed. I don't know if you've seen my signs. I have the green and black and white signs that say term limits, September 10th, November 5th. So we now have 3 studies out. One is Florida State University looking at the 15 state legislatures that have term limits. And those state legislatures, the newer people, or not newer, but they're more private sector experience. And so they tend to they spend less, they put more, narrower rails on what bureaucrats can do. Same thing, National Taxpayers Union found that Congress spends, members of Congress who've been in there for a longer period of time, spend a lot more money. So politicians in general tend to get buddy-buddy, they know people, and so they tend to kind of like rubber stamp more and more as they've been in for a long time. It's not true with every single one. Ron Paul actually started voting less, but most of the others, they voted
How do we beat Pappas?
So, when you point out that Pelosi Pappas votes the way he's told 99.5% of the time, and I think Hassan, I was told, voted the way she was told 100% of the time in the Senate, every single time.
Yeah.
When I was in the State House, one of my first experiences was that the Democrats were trying to allow absentee ballots to come in from the prisons.
Yep.
And they said, well, some are corrections workers. And I said, well, why can't they
come in?
Why can't they, if they just work at the prison, why can't they drop it in a mailbox on their way home or something, And I thought how weird that was. If they work in corrections, they can probably vote on election day. And if they don't vote on election day, they have to do an absentee ballot for some reason.
Sure.
So I thought that was ridiculous. But what I saw is Democrat Party leaders would stand up and put their thumbs up just like that, Steve Shirtliff usually. And all the Democrats around us, we had mixed seating, all the Democrats would switch their vote to yes. Steve Shirtliff would stand up and put his thumb down like that. All the Democrats around us would switch their vote to no. And I talked to Spec Bowers and Pam Tucker and Victoria Sullivan was in town. Victoria Sullivan's a great one. And they're like, yeah, that's how the Democrats work. And I'm like, well, why aren't you telling people this? Well, you got to talk about what the media talks about. And I'm like, no, you don't. You have your own issue. Sure. Democrats in the state Senate vote the way they're told 99% of the time. And Democrats in Congress vote the way they're told 99.5% of the time. So Pelosi Pappas is just one of the Democrats voting the way they're told. Now, every recession since 1930 has started under a Democrat congressional majority, other than, September 11th was a split Congress, you have a terrorist attack, so you can't put that on anyone. But other than that, every single recession, I went back through every single one, and sure enough, every recession is caused by the Democrats' economic policies within 3, 6, 9 months of them coming in and starting to push their, big government tax and spend, borrowing, bailouts, cash for clunkers, Obamacare, unfunded mandates pushed on healthcare, and it drives up costs. Spending money forces them to borrow money, float bonds, increases the deficit. Federal budget deficits are about 40 to 50% lower under Republican congressional majorities. So that's a big one. So when they double the deficit and they put all these unfunded mandates, they stop energy exploration, it kills the economy. So what Democrats have found is they keep getting their butts kicked on economics because they don't know what the hell they're talking about. To be fair, they really don't. They're still pushing authoritarian socialism and protectionism and the same economic policies that when they ran the South, they had those southern state legislatures to about 2010, 2012. They kept the South poor for about 170 years. Yeah. Almost 200 years. They kept the South poor. Now these state legislatures have switched from Democrat to Republican down south. They've got school choice now. The quality of schools is getting better. The quality of road projects are getting finished. They're using quality materials. They're getting some criminal justice reform measures finally. They're finally getting more business-friendly policies, right to work, less regulation, less of the protectionism, and job growth is going up. Businesses are moving in to the South. Unemployment is going down. Mississippi, which is one of the last to benefit, saw $2,000 per household in tax cuts, plus $9,000 per household in growth in income. So they went from like $39,000 to, after all is said and done, like $50,000 or $51,000 a year. So they've seen a dramatic improvement in Mississippi. The Republican states see all the income growth and all the tax cuts. The Democrat states see all the tax increases and all the job losses and businesses moving out, like SpaceX, I guess, is moving out of California, going to Texas. But I think that we have to get term limits done. There are 360 members of Congress who know that they can't get voted out no matter what they do. Patriot Act, government spying, government surveillance, $62 billion in handouts to prop up the war in Eastern Europe, $42 billion for this internet boondoggle that didn't provide network service for even one single American, $465,000 for a casino for pigeons, $565,000 to train a lion to walk on a treadmill. Took 8 months to train him to walk on a treadmill. And just, $2 million to put an outhouse up on the side of a mountain that can only be reached by helicopter. All this stuff in the budget, and it's not a small amount. It's estimated to be, depending on which group we're looking into it, a third to half of the total federal budget. Waste, fraud, abuse, questionable spending, and things that would be better done at the local level.
So how do we get term limits through? I am all for it.
They all have to vote on it.
Because the people who have to vote on the term limits are not going to vote themselves out of a job.
Actually, it turns out that about 90% of elected Republicans, including in Congress, state legislatures, are voting for term limits. More than 90% of elected Democrats, including legislators, are voting against term limits. However, we would need 2/3.
And they're all for term limits at the Supreme Court.
Yeah, the Democrats have just suddenly flip-flopped, and I thought that was strange. All the NPCs, they all move as one, but we'd need either 2/3 of both houses of Congress, which would mean like 70% Republican. That's kind of a hard one. Or 2/3 of state legislatures, which would be 34 states. We're really close. I think we're 31 or 32 states now. New Hampshire is one of the states where we've been fighting to get term limits done. I think that it really has to start at the state Senate level. We have got 9,000 or 10,000 activists.
We have to go soon, but if we get 2/3 of the state legislatures,
that forces
we can
Congress.
Force constitutional convention and et cetera.
Well, it's just a convention of states like the UCC thing in Chicago every year. But then we would also need 38 states to ratify it. Whatever comes out of that is just a proposal. 38 states ratify it, and then it gets added to the Constitution. And then as soon as it takes effect, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer,